Hey, me and Matt here, and I have no idea why it's dark. But, anyways, I wanted to talk about. I just looked it up recently, actually just now, because I wanted to. I see for myself. I haven't looked in a couple of years, but I just recently looked now at Chris Benoit, um, and he has actually been mentioned as the 2004 Royal Rumble winner, which I think is the right thing to do. I only say that because I know 2 years ago I looked it up, and 2004 wasn't even mentioned. Um, when I found out that Chris Benoit died, I was extremely saddened. I didn't, burst out into tears or nothing, but I was extremely saddened, and I thought we lost a really good person, a guy that had a very macho attitude, but also wasn't afraid to show his feelings, which that's not a big deal, but this whole thing about guys being robots and not crying or whatever. So, and then my friend posted something on my MSN at the time when I had MSN, and he said, "So you're praising a murderer?" And then he showed me the article where there was the murder of actually the murder suicide of Chris Benoit, who murdered his wife and his son and then himself. And then they had it on the news, and then a year or two later they had it on CBC Fifth Estate. And basically I actually interviewed Jake Roberts, who was one of Benoit's friends, also a former addict himself, as you probably already know. But, saying that this is not the guy that I knew, this is not the Chris Benoit that I knew. And then they had Chris Nowinski, who borrowed Benoit's brain somehow, and it was determined that if you take a number of shots to the head, you can basically have your brain turn to mush. So that basically means you can react as if you had never reacted before. And it makes a lot of sense, and I know that Vince McMahon disagreed with that. Of course, he's trying to protect his company and all that stuff. And I don't blame him, but, well, for reasons that it's not really his fault. Although I think Chris Benoit should have been drug tested. I don't know how you would miss that. When they went into the home, they found the bodies, and they also found a bunch of beer bottles and liquor bottles and all this other stuff. And then of course having Chris Benoit labeled as a scumbag, and therefore having everything Chris Benoit related wiped out. So he, like I said before, wasn't mentioned on the Royal Rumble Royal Rumble thing on the website. They took all his figurines off the merchandise, even some of the DVDs. On the SmackDown one, he's barely shown when they have Chris Jericho Benoit versus the Dudleys versus I can't remember who. But I didn't really think about this until I have all three of the greatest wrestlers of all time. So that's, greatest wrestlers of the 80s, greatest wrestlers of the 90s, and greatest wrestlers of uh, to the 21st century. And two things kind of struck me. First of all, in the 90s, and I think everyone will agree with me on this, on the 90s DVD, they should have included Macho Man Randy Savage. And that's kind of what pissed me off, because you had everyone else except for Randy Savage. And if you think Chris Benoit is a killer and a horrible person, well, I think Vince McMahon or whoever, put this DVD together didn't look at Lex Luger's record. Because if you recall, there was a story where he murdered. I guess if it was an accident, probably well. I mean, if it involved drugs and shit. When Lex Luger murdered Miss Elizabeth, and I'd never thought that he was any good as a wrestler. I mean, he wrestled not only in WWF, but WCW and NWA, and he was probably better than he was in WWE as the narcissist or this American hero stuff that he had. So you put him on the DVD, and even though Scott Hall didn't really murder nobody, he's still frowned upon because of his demons, and he's on a DVD. Yet Chris Benoit isn't on the greatest wrestler of the 21st century DVD, nor is Randy Savage on the greatest wrestler of the 90s DVD. Randy Savage has done a hell of a lot more. Was two-time Intercontinental Champion. Or no. Two-time WWF Champion. Intercontinental Champion. How many belts has Lex Luger held? I have no idea where this video was going, but I just wanted to talk about how, I'm glad to see that Chris Benoit is back on the website. Now, I'm not condoning what he did. I never would do anything like that. I wouldn't condone anything like that. I don't condone murder. I don't condone any of that. But the guy who did all that was not in the right frame of mind. And I saw it in a video that one of my friends did on here. If Chris Benoit hung himself and then his soul left his body and went to wherever it ends up, then it would probably say, what the fuck did I just do? And that's exactly how it is. Because when you're on drugs or alcohol, and you have too much of it, you can do things that you would never, ever normally do. And, another thing too, when I heard about this, it put me in mind of Phil Hartman's situation. For those of you who don't know who Phil Hartman is, the voice of Troy McClure on The Simpsons and the news radio and I guess Saturday Night Live back in the early 90s. When his wife went nuts and blew his brains out along with her brains out. Now, I'm not saying that should have been on the front page or anything, I'm just saying that kind of reminded me of that. Nobody offered to help Brent Hartman out. No one ever. And the saddest part of it all is that their two kids were in the damn house when it happened. So imagine the therapy they had to go through. Well, they probably still have to go through it. Anyways, I'm running out of things to say, so that's just my little spiel on it all. Okay, talk to you later.